morning. It's delightful to be with you today. My name is Hughes. I'm the CEO of an agency called Moving Minds, and I'm here today to speak with you about the future of B2B marketing and sales, data-driven approaches. There are major upheavals happening in the B2B world and in terms of marketing and sales, and it giving us the ability to target more efficiently our prospects at the height or top of the funnel. So I'm going to share that with you today. First, what is account-based marketing? This is essentially the term that outlines the future of B2B sales and marketing. There are a lot of changes and challenges that we're facing as B2B companies go to market. First of all, internally, there's a lot of disconnect between sales and marketing historically that account-based marketing addresses, bringing them tightly together. Aside from that, most salespeople believe that only 28% of themselves believe that marketing actually delivers enough qualified leads. Today, advertising platforms were designed primarily for reaching consumer audiences, meaning that for B2B companies, they're grossly inefficient for being able to target key accounts and ICPs, which are ideal customer profiles. Those are the individual decision makers within the institutions that you're targeting and trying to bring your products and services to top of mind. This is obviously very inefficient because you're casting a huge and wide net, meaning that your marketing budgets, which are always limited, are being wasted on decision makers and consumers who have no interest at all in what it is that you do. So ABM is now taken hold. It started about 5 years ago. There's a number of companies, one of which is called Demandbase, another is called Terminus, who really were pioneers in ABM and developed software platforms that allow companies to use those platforms to be able to reach B2B clients and customers. So ABM is now becoming sort of the name du jour of how most B2B companies are going to market. And the reason is really it's a better solution for building top of funnel awareness because it also aligns marketing and sales more tightly, bringing them together and more efficiently allocating budget. It also, as I mentioned, eliminates the need for large budgets that are wasted on consumers who have no interest at all in your products and services. And companies that are using account-based marketing report a 208% increase in revenue year to year, which is undeniable in terms of the ABM effectiveness on how they're using it. So ABM really is flipping the funnel. So if you think about traditional marketing, you start with a very wide net, as you can see on the left. You're broadening the market, you're building awareness, you're also wasting impressions with a lot of prospects who have no interest in your services. And then you nurture them, right? You bring them in through a variety of different mechanisms. Some may be paid advertising on Google Display, Google Keyword, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you're bringing those into your funnel, automating some emails outbound to those prospects once they come into your website. And hopefully at the end of the day, out of 100 potential prospects visiting your site, maybe 3 of them are frankly relevant to what it is that you're doing. ABM changes the whole game. It flips the funnel, meaning you start with the prospects that you want to target, and then you build your pipeline smarter and fuller with only the clients that you want to sell into. So it really is a complete change in the way we're going to market and using data to be able to target these companies. And I'll share that with you in just a moment. So again, we're only targeting high value accounts. We're focusing on those accounts that are interesting to us, and we're warming them up because frankly, you're never going to buy a product or service from a company you've never heard of. So you have to be able to build awareness inexpensively, efficiently, to be able to bring your product at the height of a decision cycle for those prospects and ICPs, which are generally only a small number of executives or decision makers within that organization. You have the ability with ABM also to target on a very specific basis. You can choose industry, you can choose specifically the organization using their IP addresses. And of course, relative to where you want to sell into, that could be determined by the geographic market, whether it's the US, EMEA, Asia Pac, that you're looking to grow your business and manufacturing base. So in terms of ABM, the results are undeniable. 97% of marketers are seeing a higher ROI than any other marketing strategy. 96% of B2B organizations say that ABM is positively impacting their marketing results. And 92% of those say ABM is a must-have strategy for B2B companies. So let's talk about a use case. How would a company like yours potentially apply the principles and theories of ABM practically in a day-to-day situation? So generally you start with a target of key accounts. That may be 50 key accounts that you want to sell your products into. It may be 100, it may be 150, it may be 200. It could be unlimited, frankly. But we generally target that down to 150 to 200 prospects. And then we shower those prospects with digital advertising specific to their IP address. We do that over a 30 to 60 to 90-day period so that we can bring attention to our products and services so they can become aware of those services. Perhaps they will click on those banners, bringing them to your website for retargeting. And we'll talk about retargeting in a moment. That is obviously intended to bring attention to what it is that you're doing. We call it the air support, right? If you think about going to battle, you're always going to have air support supporting your troops on the ground. And of course, your troops on the ground are your salespeople who are engaged in multi-channel sales outreach, which includes text emails, social selling on LinkedIn, HTML emails, a variety of different ways you can target and reach your customers, which are typical for most organizations currently being employed. But ABM allows you to deploy some air cover to those individuals doing the prospecting, doing the sales in support of that. So what does that look like? Well, literally ABM is delivering banner ads specifically to a single organization, not geo-targeting, not doing anything else. So picking the company you want to sell to. So in this case, let's just presume that it's IBM, right? Headquartered in New York. There's probably 500 employees in that particular office. And using ABM, you can target that particular office or that location with your banner ads, with your messaging. It could be offer-based, it could be value proposition-based, depends on the messaging and how you want to represent your products and services. It may be call to action-based, whether it's a white paper, whether it's a landing page, whatever it may be. And ultimately, over those 30 to 60 days, you're going to see prospects being driven into your funnel. But again, those are because they're organization specific, they're only high value accounts. When those prospects are going outbound, once you're showering them with ABM, those banner ads are being distributed using these platforms over a wide variety of consumer, business, and politics, and a number of other major ad networks, including AOL or Reuters or CNN. So they are seeing your message across any website almost within their level of interest, right? So as they're on MSNBC, as they go to CNBC, as they go to ESPN, they're seeing your brand, your messaging, your banner ads everywhere they go. So how does it work? Well, as we mentioned, step one is defining your high value accounts. Step two is sharpening your value proposition and your messaging. You're evaluating the integration of those channels, meaning marketing channels, and how they work together to drive a concentrated force to bring attention to what it is that you're selling. Step four is you're determining the monthly budget for how you want to allocate funds to ABM. And the funds are generally specific to the variety and or number of key accounts that you want to market into, right? So if you're marketing into 10 accounts is X value in terms of ad spend. If you're marketing into 200 accounts, of course, your budget is going to be larger. And generally what we recommend is to develop a budget, to develop a funnel develop a financial model in terms of what it costs per acquisition. And based on your deal size, meaning with that organization, whether you're selling a product that's $100,000 in value, whether it's $1 million in value, and of course, you have to account for the sales cycle, as well as the product and or service life cycle, meaning how long are those customers going to be engaged with your particular solution and buying from you either on a recurring basis or on a one-time basis. And then you account for upsell, right? So total deal size over 3 years. And based on those numbers, your net margin, you can determine the cost per acquisition, and you can evaluate what you're willing to pay to generate a lead, and or from that lead, you factor in conversion rates, and then you can factor in and determine what it is a cost per acquisition. And generally that's done over a 60 to 120 day period. You have to have enough sample data with generating that traffic to your website to be able to determine those types of numbers. So step 5 is creating and then executing those campaigns, delivering those value proposition based advertising to those organizations. And as I mentioned, you're developing the cost per acquisition model, and then you can sort of determine how you want to increase the volume of spend to drive revenue. So how do you measure KPIs relative to ABM? Well, you measure impressions, you can measure click-throughs, you generally monitor the types of accounts that are visiting your website, and because you're putting tracking codes on your banners, you're able to actually see those individual companies as they are driving from the campaign, which message drove them to your website, and then you can develop the lead source, right? So you know the attribution to the channel that you're marketing on, right? So that particular prospect came to your website from a link on the Yahoo ad network. So then you are looking at sales connect rate. So once those leads come in, you're looking at how many MQLs they have, how full your pipeline begins to look at, the correlation to, of course, your marketing spend. And then you have to factor in conversion rates. And of course, ultimately, it results in closed or won revenue. The power of ABM is increased exponentially by combining something called retargeting. Retargeting, for those of you who may not know, is essentially using a cookie-based capability so that once those prospects are coming to your website, you're tagging them with a cookie, and then as they go out into the world, whether they're on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or seeing your sales outreach campaigns, they are seeing you sort of everywhere, meaning they are seeing your organization's value proposition, your banner ads, as they go across multiple platforms, Google Display Network and so forth, so that you're sort of ubiquitous, if you will, right? So a very targeted campaign to those organizations from an ABM perspective, and then you have the ability to retarget to them. So as they broaden their distribution in terms of viewing hours, they are seeing you pervasively. This is how remarketing works, right? So you're visiting the site, joining a remarketing audience, you're seeing other sites, that ad is rekindling their interest, of course, and then they return to your site over a period of time, perhaps to make an order or make an engagement, make a consultation, whatever it is that you might be selling. We use visitor tracking. So there's a number of tools, one of which is called Lead Feeder. Of course, HubSpot has, which is a marketing automation platform, a number of tools to be able to track the types of visitors, the organizations that are coming into your website. They're very easy to implement. Only a simple little piece of tracking code needs to be put onto your website pages or within a Google Tag Manager that, again, will allow your salespeople to determine what the effectiveness of their outreach is. So if they're outreaching to Apple, they're going to see Apple visiting their website, indicating some level of interest. That's helpful, of course, to your sales organization. So this is what I spoke of when we talk about ubiquitous, right? So as those prospects are going out, we've retargeted them, they're seeing you everywhere. So let's talk about the next phase of B2B marketing, right? So ABM is sort of the top of level, top of funnel awareness, right? So we talked about air cover, the B2 bombers up in the air, softening the positions of your soldiers, for your soldiers. And the soldiers, of course, are your sales teams. So combined with ABM, you'll want to deploy what we call multi-channel outreach, right? So we're basically warming up the audience, the decision makers, the organizations that you want to target for the sales prospecting and outreach that your sales development organization is going to be executing. So multi-channel outreach is essentially something that we offer, but it's also something that a number of companies offer. And I'm going to show you essentially what that is. You can build it internally, that capability, and some do based on the size of their company and whether they want to have that intellectual property within their organization, or to accelerate, they may want to outsource it. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of companies doing this now on an outsourced managed service basis. So essentially it allows you to stand up an SDR outreach team in a matter of days, right? So then you can start to distribute high volumes of multi-channel touches, right? So the changes in B2B used to be, you'd run a print ad, you'd run a radio commercial, you'd run a television commercial. Today, you're running ads on social platforms, you're running ads on a variety of different networks, you're using ABM as a solution to target more efficiently, and then you're supporting that. Your soldiers are then going out and doing prospecting, right? So they're sequencing emails. They may use a platform like Mailshake to sequence cold emails. They're going to be using LinkedIn and Twitter. Ironically, I just had an associate who's trying to sell us tickets to an event, engaging me through direct messaging on Twitter, right? So the game has really changed. You can identify the decision makers you want to go after and then do very targeted outreach to those particular people. So what does a sequence, a multi-channel sequence look like, right? So as I mentioned, you start with account-based marketing, softening those positions. You may then want to combine that with a variety of different touch points. You may want to look at a prospect's profile view. So again, looking at that CEO who you want to sell into. You may be combining that with the first email to introduce yourself, followed by either a Twitter follow, a Twitter comment on their organization's Twitter page or their Facebook page. You may want to follow them then. And of course, that's followed over, the sequence is essentially set and determined. There's a lot of A/B testing that's involved to be able to do that and refine what it is that you're doing to enable what messaging is working, what tactics are working, what touch points are working. And we generally reassemble the order of these types of things to optimize our outreach, meaning how many emails and communications are we distributing outbound and converting into appointments. And that's ultimately why we're doing cold outreach or multi-channel sequences. And then of course you may be following, you have to provide value to prospects, right? So just telling them you exist is not enough, right? You have to educate them. You can provide webinar invitations. You can send them to a blog article that might be of interest to them. It may be an industry upheaval or a bit of news about their particular competitor that you might want to share with them. So it has to be really personalized to that particular prospect. A lot of cold outreach is done without any personalization at all. And then we find that to be grossly ineffective generally. So it's the challenge is organizations trying to create scale, meaning marketing and doing sales outreach to a large volume of potential customers and personalizing those touches, right? So that's really the balance, finding out what level of personalization works relative to just sending out sort of mass emails, which generally are very ineffective. So data, right? So it used to be that you had no idea who was within a company. You had no idea what their phone number was, their cell phone, their email address. And we really live in a completely different world where B2B sales is driven by individual prospect and contact data, I should say. There are a lot of companies that do this. One, of course, is Zoom Info. Another is Seamless. Another is Lead IQ that your salespeople can use to acquire a lot of the data that you see here. Of course, what does that mean, right? So you can create essentially a complete buyer profile on the prospects and what you want to sell into. So in this example, if we're selling into Mark Zuckerberg, Sundai Pichai, and of course, Mark Benioff with Salesforce, we have every bit of contact data now available to us through a variety of different platforms to be able to empower our communications to those prospects, and then taking that data and using it as a tool to do very targeted outreach and advertising outreach through LinkedIn and Facebook. So as those people are visiting those particular platforms, we're targeting those individual prospects using their individual email addresses, whether they be their work email or their personal email. So this is social selling, right? This is where sales has evolved completely and where it's going, right? So social selling is essentially the one-to-one nurturing and warming up of that individual decision maker through a variety of means, right? So as I mentioned before, we're following this gentleman on Twitter, his individual page. We're following his company on Twitter, and they're seeing these followers, right? They get notifications, they see who's following them, and you're warming up that prospect because they see you in a very intimate way, one-to-one. And of course, over time, then you're using your sales outreach to communicate through direct messaging with that prospect, and you can endorse that prospect. Again, building a series of goodwill with that particular prospect before you even start the outbound prospecting process, right? Which is going to be more effective if they know who you are on a personal level. So again, this is a combination of different communications across platforms, one-to-one based. And then of course, if you're thinking about at the highest level, we're warming up those prospects with ABM, and then we're following up with these managed sequenced emails and communications across platforms. And of course, to be able to send value, right? We're in a different world. You have to provide value to people to educate them on what it is that you do, your expertise. You need content for that journey, right? So just sending an email out to an individual prospect is really no value, right? We always get inundated, all of us get inundated with individual emails constantly that provide no value. They're pushing a service or a product on us. And really the prospect today in B2B sales and marketing, it's really providing value to those prospects. And so if you think about the content journey, the buyer's journey, so from ABM at the highest level, educating them, bringing attention to what it is that you're doing, and you do that through, it could also happen through TV and print and radio and word of mouth, of course, and digital ads and social ads and pay-per-click and all of those types of things. You're now talking about providing value. So as you get from awareness into the consideration phase, you start to do that, right? You do that through content. So it may be blog articles, it may be industry insights, it may be white papers, it may be case studies, it may be a video about a new solution or capability within their industry that they may need to know about, and you're having pattern disruption, right? So pattern disruption is essentially being able to break sort of the series of styles and formats of communication, and video is certainly burgeoning as a mechanism for doing that. And then ultimately you want to drive them to a decision about their purchase, right? So that ends up in a consultation, an order, whatever that may be. And generally that's, at that point, it's fundamental to have the ROI assessment to know that your particular solution or product is going to provide value to them, right? There's enough margin on that for them to be able to make high-level profit or whatever it may be. So when you think about sales enablement, what are those things, right? So they may be brochures and data sheets and white papers and emails and case studies and videos and all of these types of things. So, and when you think about it, we're all becoming publishers of content, whereas, it used to be Vogue magazine and New York Times were publishers, but with the capabilities now with, Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live and all of these capabilities we now have from our individual offices to be able to communicate outbound to the entire world, that content is invaluable in providing our expertise, bringing awareness to your products and services. And so everybody today has become a publisher. It's just the bottom line. And fundamentally, that may be the biggest change from a B2B sales and marketing perspective from the traditional approaches. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time. Our company, as I mentioned, is an agency. We help companies all over the world get to market faster and smarter with what we call growth as a managed service. And if you have any questions about ABM or multi-channel sales outreach, I would be delighted to follow up with you, of course. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or call me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today, and we look forward to a great conference and many, many great presentations from other speakers. Thank you.